Okay, so we're going to get started with exercise 227 today, which is the introduction to sections. And some of you have heard me talk about this because you were in 135. You know that I think sections are the most important architectural drawing you can possibly make. They're more important than anything else that you do. What we're going to do today is more an introduction to sections. We will get to the sectional drawing a little bit later, but we'll end up doing kind of a 3D perspective section. So today we're going to cut through the building. We're going to expose the inside of the building so that we can see what's happening on the inside and ultimately perform a rendering, full color, full lights, etc. out of V-Ray. So it kind of works in a two-part deal. We'll do this part of sections now, and then after Thanksgiving break, we'll do a section of your building where it's a line drawing so that you can get both out. And I'm trying to teach you this process so that you get both. But we have to start somewhere. A couple things to note. When we do a section in Rhino and V-Ray, I'm going to show you a way to do it such that, for those of you that have cut sections in SketchUp before, you know that as soon as you eliminate half the building, suddenly the sun streams through that half of the building that you eliminated, so you're not really getting accurate lighting. I'm going to show you in Rhino and V-Ray that there is a way to do a section cut where you don't lose all of that geometry. So even though it's technically invisible to the eye, from when we see it, it's not invisible to the sun and the lights and that sort of thing that are cast in the scene. So for today, I need you to open up your master site file that has all of your blocks in it. I need to make sure that that loads correctly, all of your blocks load correctly, all your materials load correctly so that you're ready to go. At that point, we need to do a save as. And it's really, really important that you do this because we're going to destroy the model. So it's not the kind of thing where you do it lightly. We're going to embed blocks. We're going to explode blocks. We're going to split stuff up. So it's a very destructive process, and you don't want to do that to your main model. So when you do the section, it needs to be on a copy of your file. And you can create the copy first, or you can do a save as. I don't really care how you create the copy. It just has to be a copy. So I went ahead and I have opened up my master site file here. I'm going to do a file save as of this. And I will have in here a dash section, and I'm going to call this section 00 for today. And I'll go ahead and click save. Again, critical that I've done that. Now, if I screw this up, it's not the end of the world. So now I need to start looking at my building and decide how and where do I want to cut a section through the building. And I know that there's a piece of ground missing here. That's where I have all my bunch grass. I have those all turned off for right now. But it doesn't matter because I'm going to end up cutting a section anyway through this. So I have to decide, do I want to cut a section that goes through this direction? Do I want to cut a section that goes through this direction? Generally speaking, when you cut a section, you want to pay attention and think about what's the best place that I could be cutting a section. If you look at your model and you say, I don't know where to cut the section, or there's not really a good place to cut the section, your building's probably not very interesting. So there should be some really magical moment that you want to cut through. Okay? So in my case, stairs are always a good place to start. If you have stairs, cut through the stairs. When in doubt, cut through the stairs. So if I'm looking at this model and I want to cut a section through this, a good place to cut that section is probably somewhere right along here, if I was cutting a long section, that would be going through my stairs. Let me go ahead and switch to ghosted mode so we can see through the building just a little bit. I don't know how much you guys can see through it. X-ray, you guys can probably see a little bit more through X-ray. So as I'm looking at this, if I were cutting through these stairs and looking that way, I'd get a sense of what this room is stacked. I get a sense of the stairs, and I get a sense of the whatever this room is, plus the pool that's up on top. So I'm kind of assembling lots of pieces. So that's a pretty good place to cut a section. If I was cutting a section this way, it's a little bit less easy to conceive. I mean, if I cut it through this room, that wouldn't be too bad because I'd see the stairs, at least in elevation view, so that could probably work. You just want to think about where's that ideal place for your section. Once you've decided where that place is, then it's a matter of establishing a plane that would work as your section. And so if I went in and I created a tall vertical plane, so I'm going to do a vertical plane, bigger than everything in my model, something like that. I then need to move this down, so I'll move V for vertical so that it clearly intersects absolutely everything in my model. Then I'm going to switch my view into the top view here for a little bit. I'm going to move so that I'm closer to my model. We'll get in here close. I'll keep moving this. I'm going to decide what is that happy point. Where do I want to cut through the building? Something like that is probably a pretty good spot. Maybe a little bit further in. Yeah, it's not bad right there. You can play around with where's that right spot. This is just establishing where in the model do I ultimately want to be cutting the section. And I like to do it with the big plane. You could do it with a line if you wanted to, but it's much easier to see it as this big wall that I'm going to use as my cutting plane. So Rhino has the ability to create a section. And the tool is, not surprisingly, called Section. The problem when we create a section is it's a very simple line drawing. Basically, it's an intersection more than anything else. It would intersect this face with every object that's in the scene and give me a little line drawing. It's not very exciting. So I don't like that. So we're instead going to use something to help us out called SectionTools. And it should have been installed on all your computers. You should see a menu item for SectionTools. If you don't have it installed, I'll walk you through installing it, but it should be there. At least it's supposed to be there. And what SectionTools does is it's actually a plugin that's written by the same people who make Rhino, and it helps us visualize what's happening in a section. So I'm going to use the SectionTools to create a new section. So if I go to the SectionTools menu and then I select Create, I could also type in cThru to create the section. It's going to say select the objects to section. Press Enter for all visible objects. Well, the easy thing would obviously be press Enter, but I really don't want to take a section of my big plane. That doesn't need to be its own section. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes, I want everything but that big plane. I'll press Enter. And then it gives me options. So what direction do I want it to be? The x-axis or the y-axis? In this case, I want it to be the x-axis. You can do a section that's on an angle, but it's a little bit more involved. You have to establish what the angle would be from point 0, if you're going to do that. If you want to, I'll help you through it, but it's not worth spending time with everybody doing it. So I have my direction set as the x-axis. My name, that's fine. As we come through here, when we get to something called solid mode, we want to be able to do surfaces, if we can. It may or may not work, but we're gonna leave it as surfaces, and the rest of this is all fine. I'll go ahead and press Enter. After I do that, you see that I get a very long line with 2 arrows on the end. So in this case, my long line, if I snap it to my plane here, it's facing toward me. That's not the direction I want to cut my section, so I'm going to flip. I can type F or click on Flip, and now it's facing the opposite direction, which is where I want it to be. I'm going to place it right on top of this wall here. There it is. And notice it says ST00. It's created that section. It's also, I could create several more sections. So if I wanted to create multiple sections through the building, I could do it. For right now, I just have one section. When I'm done, I'll press Enter on the keyboard, and it'll take a section of my drawing. It creates a new layer called ST00. That new layer contains some information about the section, and we'll get into that in just a second. I'm going to organize myself a little bit more. I'm going to create another new layer, and I'm going to call this Section 00. I'm going to put the ST00 underneath the Section 00 layer. I'm going to create another new sublayer and call this Section 00 plane. And I'll move this big plane onto that layer. That will allow me to turn it off and back on. OK, so now we want to view the section to see if it, in fact, turned out the way we want it to. So let me zoom in here a little bit. There we are. I'm looking at my model. It may be useful at this point to select my block and type zoom Z followed by S for selected so that I'm reoriented on that object. And now I want to view the section that I just created. So let me go back here to shaded mode so we see it as a shaded mode. And then I'll go to the Section Tools again. And I want to go to View, or ST View. It's going to ask me to select sections, or I can click L for List. I only have one, ST00. I could type in ST00, but to me, if I click on the list, it's much easier to just pick it. I'll go ahead and say OK. Select viewport to enable this section in. Well, I'm currently in the pool 01 viewport. So it doesn't matter what viewport I'm in, but I need to type that. If I was in the perspective viewport, for example, let me go to set view. If I went back to perspective, for example, select viewport to enable. The way that I select it is I actually type the viewport name. So I'll type in perspective, and I'll hit enter. When I do that, it gets rid of part of my building so that I can see, did that cut happen where I want it to happen? And you notice that it conveniently cuts through my blocks without a problem, and it puts in, they're locked right now, but it puts in surfaces. If I can, come on. Sorry, I didn't unlock it. There, come on. There we go. It puts in surfaces wherever it's done the cut, which is really, really convenient. In some places, however, depending on how you modeled it, it may have missed some of the cuts. So you see here that it missed these walls. It didn't fill those in. So in that context, I actually have to create some additional fill. So I'll create a new layer, a sublayer, called Section Fill. I'll make it the active layer, and I need to go through and I need to actually fill in the section. So this is probably the most boring part of what I will do today, because you guys have to bear with me until I get it done. But I need to fill in all of these pieces. You like how structurally that really doesn't work, but we won't talk about that right now. It did fill in all of my stairs, thankfully. That's good. Filled in those. My roof needs a little bit of love here. Come on, snap for me. So I'm essentially just filling in all those little pieces. That's filled in. We need to fill this in. When you cut these sections, it's also where you discover all the problems of things that you've messed up on when you modeled. So you may find that you have to do a few corrections along the way, but that's OK. You will also find now that you'll use this tool, you'll create these sections sometimes when you're modeling just to be able to see really easily inside, because they're temporary, and I can turn them right back on. And SectionTools doesn't mess with or destroy any of the geometry. It's all still where it is. OK, so I've filled in everything that I've cut through that it didn't catch for me. All of that's filled in nicely, except for the ground. And you see that I have my big foundation that's punching down into the ground. So I really do need to do a little bit more work to fill in the ground here. I can, at this point, I can select the curve that it created of the terrain right there, and I could copy that. It's going to be V for vertical, and my end snap. Come on, buddy. Let me just make a copy here, and we'll drop it down lower there. Same thing with this side. Oops. Copy, vertical. We'll drop it down. That. And then I could take these two pieces, there and there. I could loft them. I could take this piece and this piece. I could loft them. And I probably need to fill in right underneath here as well. So we'll do a little bit more. Let me take just going to draw a curve there, there. Do one there, and we'll do a separate one here. I'll select this. I'll select this one. Copy. V for vertical. We'll drop those pieces straight down to there. I'll take this and that, and we'll loft them together. And I'll take this, and I'll loft that together. It looks like I made a slight error on this piece, but you guys get the idea, certainly. So I'm filling in a little bit along that line so that when I zoom in and start to get my sectional view, I'm filling in the ground so that there's something solid that's there, as opposed to just being a thin line, because obviously we want some ground to be there. Okay, so I've done all of that work. I can see my view here, but if I went to render it, this is where everything breaks down. V-Ray doesn't recognize SectionTools, so it would render the whole building. So I'm going to go ahead, and at this point I'm going to clear the SectionTools. I'll come back to it again, but I'll go ST clear all views, or I can select clear all from all views, and I get my whole building back again. So at this point, I need to actually start to mess with my geometry. So I'll go ahead and I'll select my big old block instance here, and I'll go explode, which is not what you ever want to do, right? And you can see it's creating all kinds of layers. It's a mess, right? But that's the way it works, okay? So I'll continue that by SEL block instance to see what other block instances I have. Remember, I had lights that were brought in there. I had furniture that was brought in there. All of those now have to be exploded. Okay. Once again, I will go SEL block instance. Do I have any more? Because sometimes there's nested blocks. We'll explode again. Are there any more? SEL block instance. A few more. Let's explode again. SEL block instance. Okay, I finally got to, basically you keep doing that until there are no more blocks. Okay, everything's exploded. All of the layers that were my block layers still exist as references, but they're no longer necessary because they're kind of irrelevant. It also created a bunch more layers. So this is where I told you it gets real messy. Okay? But this is the way it works. So what I need to do now is not pull off my little microphone. There we go. Is I need to essentially create this section semi-manually. So I'm going to go back down to my section plane. I'm going to turn that one back on. And I'm going to use that to do a massive split of my building. So this can take a little bit of time. So I'm going to select everything except for that big plane. I'm going to type split. I'm going to select that big plane as my cutting object, and I'll hit enter. And essentially, it's anything that plane is intersecting, it's going to try to split in half. There's going to be a bunch of split faileds happening. That's okay, because sometimes you have objects that aren't intersected, in which case that object, the split, failed because it didn't intersect my plane. So you just kind of have to hang out here for a while and let it do its thing. You're splitting everything, everything. The land splits. Basically, absolutely everything splits. All right. So a bunch of my stuff was split, which is a good sign. Now, if I were to view this in my right side elevation, actually, let me switch to my left side elevation because it's going to make the selection process a little bit easier. And I were to select the stuff that is on this side of my big split line. See how my selection is stopping halfway through the building? That's a good sign. That's the way I want it to. So I'm confirming that, yes, this is actually working the way I want it to work. OK, so now what I need to do is I need to assign a very special material to my building. So the half of my building that I'm keeping can have all its normal materials on it, doesn't matter. But the half that I want to be invisible to V-Ray, I need to install a special V-Ray material. I've made this material for you. It's probably inside of your material package that you downloaded. It's called Seethrough Material. If you go to the V-Ray materials library and you go to other, no, that was the wrong one. Let me just go to V-Ray materials, go to the index. There should be a category for other, specialty materials. There we go, see-through. So we can see the preview of it. Essentially, in a see-through material, the material is invisible, but it still blocks light. So it's not something that could happen in real life. We can't have this kind of a material. Okay, but it works for V-Ray, so that's good. So you can download that, or it should be in your package. There is also a tutorial online that will walk you through how to make it. So if you wanted to make it from scratch, apparently it's not there. How about there it is, see-through, 8.22. This will walk you through how to make it if you wanted to make it from scratch. I'm not going to make it from scratch. I'm just going to load it up. I'm going to go into my V-Ray materials, or in my V-Ray material editor, and I'm going to load. That's let's see here, resources, V-Ray materials. It's in special materials. It's going to be see-through. There we go. And so now see-through should be loaded right there. If I do a preview of it, guess what? It's invisible. That's the idea. So now I need to select, and I'll make my left view big here. I'm going to select everything right up to that line, and I want to make sure I get nice and close to that line, so I select as much as possible. Sometimes you'll accidentally get things that are on the other side, in which case you may have to use Control and deselect certain pieces. Like that, for example. If you're having some kind of a stubborn block that's it's showing up when you don't want it to, you can just delete it. Remember, you do have that flexibility. Okay, so now everything's selected over here, which is great, except we need the light to come through the windows if there was light coming through windows. So I want to deselect anything with glass on it. So I'm going to look over on my, and this is where layer organization starts to matter, I'm going to look for anything that has glass listed. Right? We'll start up at the top here, not much there, but when I get down here, here's all my real layers. So as I come down here, let's see, glass railing, we'll turn that off. Windows, window glass. Oh, we have to wait for a second. Window glass, we'll turn that off. There's another set of window glass, we'll turn that off. Okay, and I think that's it. So I deselected the things that are glass, because I need the light to come through the glass. And now I'm going to override the materials on all of these objects by going to my V-Ray materials editor. I'm going to right-click on see-through and say apply material to selection. So now see-through is applied to everything on this side of my section. I'll deselect. Then I need to go back and turn on and select all of the glass that I just turned off. So let me turn on window glass, and then I'll right-click and say Select Objects. I'll turn on this window glass. I'll right-click and say Select Objects. I'll turn on the glass railing. I'll right-click and say Select Objects. So now I have all the glass selected that I previously deselected. The glass needs to perform as normal on the side of the section that I'm keeping, but it needs to go away on the side of the section, or needs to change on the side of the section that I'm making transparent. So at this point, I need to hold down Control, and I need to deselect all of the glass that's on this side of my section. So we'll zoom in here a little bit, take a look. Yep, looks like all the glass is now on that side. Perfect. So this glass that's selected, I still want light to be able to come through, but I don't. If I left it as glass, as a material, I'd see reflections on it. So I'd have floating glass panes. That wouldn't work either. So essentially, I need to create a special material that's just transparent. Like there's nothing to it. Doesn't do anything. So I will right click on C materials. I'll say create material standard. I don't have this one prepped for you because it's really easy to create. I'll call this material transparent. And I will make the transparency white. And I should be able to preview it and see nothing, which is the idea. This transparent material is not see-through material. See-through material does have its own special characteristics, so this is not. I just want to be clear. I will right-click on that and say Apply Material to Selection. So now all of my glass that is on the section cut side is going to be transparent, so light's going to come through. So at this point, I have my model set up and ready to perform my rendering. A couple other things. The section fill, or excuse me, the section plane gets turned off. The section fill probably does need a material. I need some kind of a gray or a black to fill in whatever I've cut through. So I would go to my materials, and we'll just create a black material for that. Create material standard. Make it black. Rename it black. And I'm going to assign it to that layer. Apply material to layer. And it's going to go on the section fill layer, I hope. If I can find it. Section fill. I'm also going to apply it to, if V-Ray doesn't crash on me, the ST00 layer. And give it a little bit more time. Come on, V-Ray. That's the layer that the SectionTools made that has some of the objects on it. That when the SectionTools cut the section, it's supposed to fill in any solid objects with surfaces. It didn't do everything, but it did do some of it. OK, so obviously it's not saving, so I'm going to close Rhino and save Rhino and then open it again. Apologize for that. OK, so now we're back. I'm going to assume that it did, in fact, save everything, but I did need that last little piece, the ST00. That needs to have the black applied to it as well. So I'll go back to my material editor. I'll find black, and I'll apply that to the if I can find it. There we go. It's coming up. ST00. OK, so now that's applied to ST00. So let me get back into my perspective view. I'm going to zoom down in, and I want to establish the view that I want to try to render. So maybe I'll take this object, zoom selected, so that I can get kind of in close. I'm going to switch into shaded mode so I can get a sense. Now, it would be helpful if I temporarily saw the section too, so I could get the view right. So I'll go back to my SectionTools, and I'm going to go to ST View. We want to view 00. What viewport? Perspective. This, by the way, is why I told you never put spaces in your names, because you can't type in a space when you do this. Space automatically enters it. So now I can see, OK, there it is. Looks pretty good. Let me zoom in here a little bit, get the view that I want. Remember, I can still adjust the lens length. It was at 50. Let me go to 28, so we're a little bit wider. And maybe I like that as my sectional rendering here. At this point, I'll save the view. So I'm going to go in, go to Set View, Name Views, Section 00 Perspective. I'll click OK. That then saves that view for me. And now I can go ahead and perform the rendering. So just to make sure that it's working, remember I want to go into my V-Ray options and make the output small. So I don't need a large output. I'll go back to a nice small output. And then we'll go ahead and render and give it a shot. I believe that this is set for the night rendering right now. I don't know for sure. We'll see when it renders. It doesn't matter for our purposes today whether you do it as a night render or a day render. Oh, no, it's a day render. But we can see that, yes, the section did cut through my building. Yes, the sunlight is coming into my building, but not all the way through the side. It's only wherever the windows are. And we can see that all of my lights are still active and working, which is the point. So now it's just a matter of bumping up the size of the rendering and doing a final version of this rendering. I could also load in my night settings because I saved my VisOp, so I could go back to my night settings and do a rendering of that. So I've got a lot of flexibility here in terms of what I do now that I've cut up the section. But I don't want to try to go back and edit the block. So if I went back to my original and made a change, it wouldn't update anymore because this is a permanent cut and explosion. And that's the nature of a section. Okay? So what I want you to do today as part of this is I want you to get a sectional rendering of your building of some kind. Obviously, the quality isn't that high. I'll let this run so you can see a higher quality version of it. But that's our goal, is to create this sectional rendering. We will end up doing line drawings both on top of this and as its own entity. So you'll get this combination of line drawing and section. But for right now, we're just doing the section. When you look at this, you should be able to not see any artifacts. So there shouldn't be any glass panels that are floating in front of the section. It should all be transparent. There shouldn't be a big sunlight streaming in from one side or the other, because that obviously defeats the purpose as well. And it shows that you didn't quite cut the section the way it should have been cut. Make sense? So I know it's a lot to try to take in and do this sort of thing, but you should all be relatively done with your model at this point. We will, today we're going to cut this section. Next Monday, we will start in with plans, elevations, etc. A lot of the same techniques we will use as this section tool. So when I cut a plan, for example, it's just a horizontal section at plan height. So there's a lot of those kinds of things. So that's kind of where we're going as the semester winds down. Let me know if you have any questions, but I think you guys can handle it. All right.